So let's just be aware of the iOS submission process, how we actually submit an app to the App Store once we're ready. Now, this might be off, in the distant future for you, but I want to have these things in your head because it's really important that we consider some of the regulations and specifications that Apple provides for its developers. Now, this is a very different process than submitting to, say, the Google Play Store, which is quite a bit simpler. With the Play Store, it's a really small fee. There's like a really quick review process that basically just makes sure that you're not, doing anything illegal, and then your app is submitted and published. The iOS store is quite a bit more complicated. Some people like that, some people hate that. Totally depends on you. Personally, I like it. I don't have that many Apple devices myself, but the iOS App Store is significantly more profitable. Generally, people are willing to spend more on apps for the iOS App Store than the Android App Stores. So that's been my findings, anyways. So I'm on this website on the Apple developer site, submitting iOS apps to the App Store. And on here, you can see some of the basic outlines. Make sure you have the newest version of Xcode, basically. Make sure that your targets are set correctly. So if we look at our Xcode, we got to make sure that we have, iOS 12 set or 12.2, etc., and all these other things set up. And then there's just a few other things here, including human interface guidelines. If you want to have your app on the iPad, you need to make sure it works on the iPad Pro, the large iPad Pro, the regular iPad, things like that, and the mini, and also the different iPhones. So you can see there's a bunch of different guidelines here. We've gone through these before, but the human interface guidelines in particular are really, really valuable, where there's just a giant amount of content in here that you can go through that tells you, here's what we look at whenever we review the apps, and we may in fact reject your app based on these guidelines. Going back, if we keep scrolling down, we talk about App Store Connect, which I'll get to in just a second, testing your app, which is a huge part of any sort of app development, and then some business and marketing insights. So this is a great little website to visit to just get some more details. TestFlight is a beta testing service provided by Apple that allows you to basically submit your app for beta testing. Now, personally, I think testing is one of the most important parts of the app design process. Some people don't do any testing at all, and that's totally fine. Some apps don't necessarily need testing. For example, if I made a calculator, I probably can, test the calculator myself and figure out if it's broken or not. If I'm making something more complicated, though, and let's say something that, depends on a lot of various factors, like, it might like help someone's health. Like, let's say I'm making, an exercise app. I really want to test that, so I might do this sort of testing system. So TestFlight sends basically a bunch of emails to a bunch of people, and they can jump onto your testing, and you can have like literally up to 10,000 testers running through your app. It's really cool system. You'll get feedback. You can read this page for more information, but basically you get this interesting screen on App Store Connect that tells you, how many people installed it, what they did, what did they tap, etc., any problems that they ran into, so on and so forth. There's also this page called Making the Most of Your Product page. You will have to design your product page. There's also specifications for your app icon. If your app is going to be on, various platforms like watchOS or tvOS in particular, there's very specific regulations for the icon. Like tvOS, it has to have a three-dimensional effect, and there's a bunch of other things. Anyway, so you can look at this page just to get some ideas of how people sort of generate great pages on the App Store. Remember that the App Store, this is what's driving sales if your app is for sale or if it's monetized in some way. This is what's going to drive people to your app. So you really need to focus on basically search engine optimization, but for applications. And there's a lot of details here that you can sift through to figure that out. The last page I'm going to take you to is what the App Store Connect actually looks like. Now, with this account, I don't want to use my actual developer account. I'm using an old developer account where the membership has, in fact, expired, so I'm a little bit limited on what I can show you. But basically, once you have purchased your developer account, which again is like $110 for a year, and which lets you publish the applications that you want during that year, you'll have the App Store Connect. You'll go to App Store Connect, you can see My Apps, you can view analytics like how many downloads you have, how people are using your app, sales, if you made any sales, and like whenever you get paid out, payments. And there's a bunch of other things in here like for taxes and stuff. If you click on My Apps, it'll actually take you to the app screen. Again, I'm not going to have anything because basically this is a dummy account, but I can click and add apps. I can join teams and things. And I can even add Mac OS apps now with the newer versions of Xcode. So this is App Store Connect, and within this, that's where you build all these things like TestFlight, like your product page. All of those elements are done through App Store Connect. So that's the basic process. You submit a bunch of things, you upload it to App Store Connect, you submit it for review to be published on the App Store, and you wait patiently, and eventually you'll get word back. Yep, you're good to go, and your app will appear on the iOS App Store. So it's a very exciting day, and I hope that someday you get to do that for yourself. Maybe in future courses in particular, I'm thinking of the course entitled Design and Build, where that's sort of the end goal is to make something published. But yeah, it's good to be familiar with this process because it's really sort of a shame to design these beautiful interfaces and then realize they don't really fall into these human guidelines. And I didn't really think about making something for example, the iPad Pro that's 11 inches. I probably should rethink my design. I probably should rethink the functionality of my app and so on. So have these things in mind as you're building your app, and it will save you a ton of time later.